Today is Ash Wednesday, the very first day of the season of Lent, this season when we are journeying together on the road that will lead us to Holy Week and Easter. And yet, despite the fact that it's Ash Wednesday, you will notice that there is one thing that is pretty conspicuously missing from our liturgy tonight, and that is the ashes for which Ash Wednesday is named. I decided to forego them this year, partly because of the practical challenges of trying to find a safe way to distribute them during COVID. Although I do know some churches have mailed out ashes for people to self-impose at home, and I've heard of other churches that are doing drive-by ashes. But perhaps more profound than the practical challenges of trying to figure out how to do ashes, as I thought about this ritual of imposing ashes this Ash Wednesday, it seemed to me to be a little bit out of touch with reality, even a little bit redundant. In the Bible, ashes were meant as a sign of grief and sorrow for sins, and also as a tangible reminder of mortality, a reminder that we are vulnerable creatures who won't live forever. A reminder that one day we are going to die, that our bodies will return to the earth. Ash Wednesday has always been one of my favorite liturgies of the year, even since I was a child. So visceral, so honest, so down to earth, literally. The practice of rubbing ashes on your foreheads in the shape of a cross each year and reminding you of your mortality, that you are dust and that you will be returning to dust, that has got to be one of the most profound things I get to do as a priest. Yet I have to say, I feel like the past year since COVID began has been one long reminder of our mortality, that we are vulnerable creatures, that life is precarious and precious, that our time here is finite, perhaps more finite than we imagined, that we are going to die. The prayer book reminds us that Lent, these 40 days that lead us to Holy Week and Easter, is a season of prayer and fasting and self-denial. Yet the truth is, we have all been living through a kind of perpetual season of self-denial these past 12 months since COVID began. What has felt in some ways like a Lent that will never end. We have all, in different ways, had to give up so much of what is normal in our lives, to fast from so many of the things, so many of the relationships that we usually just take for granted. It wasn't a fast of our own choosing, but it has been a fast nonetheless, one we've had to learn to embrace out of love for each other and for the sake of one another's safety and well-being. But in light of all of that, I have been wondering, why are we here today? And what is the point of Ash Wednesday and this whole season of Lent during this time of COVID? Well, our gospel story, this gospel story from Matthew's gospel for this evening, might have some clues for us. We hear this same gospel story from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount every Ash Wednesday. It's always the same. This story about piety and about prayer and about what authentic prayer should be like and what it shouldn't be like, and about what our priorities should be as followers of Jesus Christ. But honestly, I think all of it can be summed up in that very last line of the gospel story, in those very familiar words of Jesus. where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If you've spent any time in a church community, you will no doubt have heard these words before. So many times probably that the impact of them is often lost on us. They're so often used to preface stewardship campaigns as a reminder that giving your treasure to church, your money, is also a way of orienting your heart to God. And that's certainly true from my experience. But I also think these words have a deeper meaning, much deeper than stewardship of our money. Because I think they're also about stewardship of our lives. They're about what our true treasure is, and they're about what our true treasure is. And having lived through the past year might just make all of us more aware of this deeper meaning. Because, of course, so many of the things that we consider as treasure, so many of the people, so many of the relationships have, in a way, been taken away from us, right? Our family, our friends, our church community, being able to hug one another, being able to touch each other, being able to share a meal together, or sing together, or laugh together. All of these have been taken from us, not forever, but for a season that is turning out to be much longer than any of us would have chosen. And as hard as this has been for us in different ways, and it has been hard, as hard as it has been, there is also a way when something is taken away from us that we can treasure it more deeply. Whether it's because of death or distance or pandemic, loss has a way of clarifying what is truly most important, what matters most in the end, what we love most of all. Loss reveals to our hearts what is treasure in our lives like nothing else. Loss reveals to our hearts what is truly treasure in our lives like nothing else. And I wonder if maybe the invitation of Ash Wednesday this year and of this whole season of Lent, I wonder if the invitation is for us to sit with this reality, for us to really sit with it, to sit with our grief and our sorrow for what we have lost and for what has been taken away from us for the time being, or who has been taken away from us. Not to run from the pain we feel or numb ourselves to it or brush it under the carpet, but to really sit with it, to allow ourselves to feel it, not because it's fun to feel pain, but because it might just open our eyes and our hearts to something, the true treasure in our lives. In a way, we are doing this as a community this year during Lent. As some of you may have heard by now, we're doing something together that I'm calling the Gratitude Challenge. It's a pretty simple concept, really. The invitation is to find a way to express your gratitude to one person in your life every day of Lent. So that's for 40 days. This could be a handwritten note, it could be a text, it could be a Facebook or WhatsApp message, it could be a phone call, it could be a socially distant meeting. The point is to tell someone that you're grateful for them every day, to leaven your life and to leaven the lives of others with gratitude and thanksgiving. The really wonderful, amazing thing about gratitude is this. It has a way of helping us to pay attention, to notice things, to notice what is good, to notice the treasure in our lives, even the treasure that we must fast from for the time being. In a way, in a profound way, COVID has reminded us of what Lent always tries to remind us of, that we aren't going to live forever. The clock is ticking, that death will come one day for each of us. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day. And we don't need ashes to remind us of that this year. It is all around us. So what difference will that reality make for us? What difference will it make for how we'll live our lives? What difference will it make for how we spend the time that we've been given? What do our priorities need to be? What relationships do we need to tend? What people in our lives do we need to do a better job of loving? And what do we need to do to make sure things are right between us and God? As the Apostle Paul says today, now is the acceptable time. Now is the acceptable time to be asking these questions. And now is the acceptable time to act on them. It's a matter of life and death. Amen.